He was just a single dad trying to reach the hospital in time for his daughter until a scream in the dark forced him to choose between his own child and a stranger in danger. He had no idea that one split-second decision would rewrite the rest of his life. If you believe in the quiet power of kindness and the unexpected turns that life can take, stay with us. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories that heal, uplift, and inspire. Now, let's begin. Single dad saved a woman from a mugging hours later. He learned she was the CEO he'd been emailing. The city was still wet from the afternoon rain, glistening under the amber glow of streetlights. Jack Nolan pulled into the gas station, his hands trembling slightly as he held the phone to his ear. The nurse on the other end had just said 6 words no parent ever wants to hear. "Your daughter's had an accident. She's stable, but you should come. Lily, his little girl, 7 years old." A tangle of freckles and wild curiosity. Jack's heart kicked against his ribs as he yanked the keys from the ignition. He didn't ask for details, didn't need them. She was in the hospital. That was enough. He bolted toward his truck, half-empty coffee sloshing over the lid as he fumbled to throw it aside. Every second felt like punishment. Every red light a cruel joke. The GPS said 23 minutes. He knew the shortcut could make it in 16. If traffic was light, it wasn't. The night was heavy with that quiet tension city folks knew too well, something always just around the corner. Jack cut through side streets and alleyways like a man possessed trying to breathe through the panic tightening around his chest. Then he heard it. A scream. Sharp, panicked human. It came from the alley just ahead, a narrow slice of concrete between 2 brick buildings. Jack slammed on the brakes. His headlights caught a flicker of motion. A woman stumbled backward, her purse ripped from her hands. A man, hooded, lunged at her. Jack's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. 3 seconds. That was all he had. In one direction, the hospital, his daughter, his everything. In the other, a stranger in danger right now. He could drive past. Call 911. No one would blame him. Lily needed him. But before the thought even finished forming, Jack was out of the truck. He ran. "Hey," he shouted, gravel crunching under his boots. The mugger spun, startled. The woman, dazed, crumpled to the pavement. Jack didn't think he moved. Tackle, grab, shove. Years of football and construction work fueled his momentum. The man swung a blade. Jack caught the glint just before it grazed his shoulder. Pain flared hot. He didn't stop. He got the guy down, wrestled the knife away, and shouted into the night until the man scrambled to his feet and bolted, disappearing into the darkness. Breathing hard, Jack turned to the woman. She was shaking, but conscious, cradling her wrist. "You okay?" he asked, crouching beside her. She nodded, mutely, eyes wide. Elegant, late 30s, maybe wearing a soaked trench coat and heels that had no business in a neighborhood like this. There was something sharp in her features, refined. But now she looked stunned, vulnerable. I didn't see him," she said, voice raw. "He came out of nowhere." Jack offered his hand. She took it hesitantly. "I've got to go," he said, checking the time. "Can you walk? There's a diner around the corner. I'll call someone to come help. I'll be okay," she cut in. "Thank you. Really? But Jack was already turning. Blood was seeping through his shirt. Lily was waiting. He didn't look back. The hospital smelled like antiseptic, and time slowed as Jack sprinted through the sliding doors. The nurse at the front desk pointed him to pediatrics without asking for ID. Maybe it was the blood. Maybe it was the wild look in his eyes. He found Lily curled in a hospital bed, her head wrapped in a white bandage, cheeks flushed with sleep. She took a fall down the steps at school, the doctor explained. A mild concussion and a bruised rib. Nothing broken. She's stable now. Jack exhaled like he hadn't done in years. He pulled a chair beside her bed and took her hand gently, careful not to wake her. Her little fingers, so small against his scarred knuckles, twitched in her sleep. "I'm here, baby," he whispered. "Daddy's here." The adrenaline crashed out of him all at once, leaving only pain and exhaustion. His shoulder throbbed, but he didn't care. He watched her chest rise and fall, and for a long time he didn't move. It wasn't until hours later in the quiet of the hospital corridor that Jack noticed the blood had soaked through his shirt sleeve entirely. A nurse insisted he be checked out. The cut was shallow, needed a few stitches, but it would heal. "You're lucky it didn't go deeper," the doctor told him. Jack didn't feel lucky. He felt worn, like the world had taken another piece of him. But he would have done it again, 100 times over. As the dawn crept in through the hospital windows, Jack checked his phone. A missed call, no voicemail, and one new email. Subject: Warden Corp. Interview invitation. Message: Dear Mr. Nolan, we've reviewed your application and would like to schedule an interview. Please report to the 31st floor at 9:00 a.m. today. We look forward to meeting you in person. Jack blinked. Warden Corp. He had sent that resume nearly a month ago. Nothing. Not even a rejection. And now, today, of all days, they wanted to meet. He glanced at Lily. Still asleep, peaceful. He checked the time. 7:12 a.m. He had 2 hours. His shoulders still burned and his shirt looked like it had lost a fight with a lawnmower. But for the first time in weeks, something flickered inside him. A door creaked open. A maybe. He stood, slowly kissed Lily's forehead and whispered, "Daddy's got one more thing to do today. I'll be back before lunch." He didn't know yet that the woman in the alley would be waiting for him on the 31st floor, and she wouldn't be thanking him. She'd be interviewing him. Jack stood in front of the towering glass building, his reflection a contrast to the polished marble behind it. His button-down shirt, freshly laundered in a rush, clung uncomfortably to the fresh stitches beneath it. The pain in his shoulder pulsed gently with each breath, a reminder of the choice he'd made the night before. He didn't regret it, but he did wish he had a better jacket. The security guard at the front desk barely looked up when Jack gave his name. A printed badge was handed over, and a curt gesture sent him toward the elevator banks. 31st floor, the guard said. Jack stepped inside the elevator, smoothed his hair with the palm of his hand, and inhaled deeply. He'd been in buildings like this once, back when he wore a blazer to work, back when meetings had catered lunches and people looked him in the eye. Now the collar of his shirt itched in unfamiliar ways, and he couldn't stop thinking about Lily sleeping alone in that hospital bed. "You're doing this for her." The elevator chimed. The doors slid open into a floor too quiet to be busy, too pristine to feel lived in. He stepped out his boots, making soft thuds on the carpet. A receptionist, all angles and elegance, looked up from her monitor and smiled faintly. "Mr. Nolan?" she asked. "That's me," he nodded. "The CEO will see you now." Jack blinked. "Sorry, did you say CEO?" She stood. "Yes. Ms. Ward prefers to handle special hires herself. Right this way." Jack's pulse spiked. CEOs didn't do interviews. Not for field engineers. Not for men who'd emailed resumes into the void. He followed her down a glass-lined corridor, each step echoing louder in his ears than the last. The assistant knocked gently, opened the frosted door, and stepped aside. Inside, behind a sleek black desk, was the woman from the alley. Jack froze. She was dressed differently, power in every line of her navy suit, her dark hair pulled back sharp against the pale backdrop. But there was no mistaking her. The frightened, rain-soaked woman he'd pulled from the pavement just hours ago now sat poised, composed, and apparently in charge of a company he'd spent weeks begging for a chance to join. Her gaze flicked up and locked onto his. For a beat, neither of them moved. Then she stood. "Mr. Nolan," she said calmly, her tone practiced and neutral. "Thank you for coming." Jack nodded stiffly. "Ms. Ward." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. He hesitated, then sat. The assistant closed the door behind them. The silence stretched. Finally, Elena spoke. "I wasn't expecting to see you this morning." Likewise, Jack said, his voice lower than usual. She didn't apologize, didn't smile, just studied him as though he were a riddle she hadn't figured out yet. "You're the same man who submitted designs for our Southside initiative last month?" she asked. "Yes," Jack replied. "I sent a proposal for a cost-effective plumbing system using salvaged components. Never heard back." Elena clicked her mouse. "I reviewed it this morning. It's unconventional. Creative. Too creative perhaps for our procurement team. But I saw potential." He nodded, unsure what to say. "Your resume shows you used to run your own engineering firm." "I did, before. Everything changed." Another pause. "I'm sorry," she said finally, and there was the first hint of something real in her voice. "About what happened last night. I didn't get the chance to thank you." "I didn't do it for thanks," Jack said evenly. "I heard someone in trouble. You were on your way to the hospital." "Yes." Elena's lips pressed together. She looked down for a moment as if to compose herself, then said, "How's your daughter?" The question caught him off guard. "She's okay. She hit her head. Just a concussion." "She's lucky," Elena murmured. Jack leaned forward slightly. "Why am I here?" Her eyes flicked back to his. "Because I want to offer you a job." Silence. "You don't know anything about me," he said. "I know enough," she replied. "I know that most people in the city would have kept driving last night. I know that your designs show not only technical skill, but compassion. Every element is built around access, affordability, community impact. I know you've been trying to get back on your feet and that you've done it without cutting corners." She stood and walked to the window behind her. "We're expanding our community development program. I need someone who understands what it means to build for people, not just for profit. I think that someone might be you." Jack stared at her. Part of him wanted to laugh. Part of him wanted to cry. He'd come here expecting bureaucracy, a quick rejection. Not this. "What's the catch?" he asked quietly. Elena turned back around. There was something in her expression now, guarded but vulnerable. "The catch is that I need to trust you, and I need you to trust me." He stood slowly. "I don't know if I'm there yet." She nodded once. "Fair enough," then softer. "I know you don't want charity." "No," Jack said. "I don't. This isn't that. This is recognition. For work you've already done and the kind of person you are." Jack's hand curled loosely at his side. The bandage beneath his sleeve itched. "I'll take the job," he said. Their eyes met again. "But I'm not making promises I can't keep." Elena smiled, just barely. "Neither am I." As Jack stepped back into the elevator, heart-pounding, he caught his reflection in the mirrored wall. Tired, bruised, stitched up, but maybe stepping into that alley hadn't broken him. Maybe it had saved something. Not just for her, but for him too. The construction site was a gutted warehouse on the south side of the city, a skeleton of steel beams and broken windows wrapped in caution tape and possibility. Jack stood just inside the main entrance, the morning wind sweeping dust past his boots. This was it, his new assignment. Warden Corp's community redevelopment program had just broken ground here, aiming to convert the forgotten building into a multi-purpose community center, shelter's job, training rooms, child care. All buzzwords Jack had heard before. Usually they fizzled into glossy brochures and empty promises. But something about Elena Ward made him think maybe this time was different. Maybe. "Hey, you Nolan!" Jack turned to see a woman in a high-vis vest and a skeptical stare. She had salt and pepper hairlines at the corners of her eyes and the posture of someone who'd spent her life proving she belonged in rooms where no one wanted to let her in. "Yeah," Jack said. "Jack Nolan." She nodded, unimpressed. "Linda Hooper, site supervisor. I was told you'd be joining the team. You a clipboard guy or a get-your-hands-dirty guy?" Jack smiled. "Little of both, depending on the day." "Good answer," she grunted. "Grab a helmet. We're behind schedule, and the architect's drawings are, let's say, optimistic." As she turned, Jack caught a faint smile on her face. By noon, his shirt was damp, his shoulder aching under the bandage, and his palms dusted with grit. And yet, for the first time in years, Jack felt good. Useful. He adjusted the layout of a plumbing system that had been over-engineered on paper using salvaged copper pipe from an old HVAC system he found on site. Linda watched with narrowed eyes, then gave a curt nod of approval. "You're efficient," she said, leaning against a steel beam. "I've had practice. I used to run my own firm." She raised an eyebrow. "Used to long story." Linda didn't push. She simply handed him a bottle of water and walked off to yell at the electrician for coiling conduit like spaghetti. Jack looked around the half-demolished space. No walls yet, just the shape of something better. He liked that the potential. At 3 p.m., a car pulled up. Sleek, black, out of place. Elena stepped out. Dressed down today, still elegant but more accessible. Jeans, a cream blouse, flats. Her hair was in a low ponytail and she squinted in the sun as she walked across the gravel. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and met her near the trailer. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I try to check in on major projects," she replied, "especially ones that involve people I personally hired." He nodded, guarded but polite. "How's the shoulder?" she asked. "Healing." Slowly. They stood in silence a beat too long, the wind tossing a piece of paper across the lot. "You redesigned part of the plumbing?" she asked. Jack gestured toward the blueprints pinned on a corkboard. "The original plan routed water through a system that costs twice what's necessary. I adjusted it to use reclaimed materials and reduce long-term maintenance costs." Elena studied the sketches. "How much savings are we talking? 80,000 over 5 years?" She turned to him. "And you just did that?" Jack shrugged. "Figured that's why I'm here." Elena looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she simply smiled. A real one this time. Not polite, not corporate. Then she did something unexpected. She took off her blazer and rolled up her sleeves. "Mind if I take a look inside?" Jack blinked. "You want a tour, I want to understand the work. Not just read about it in quarterly reports." Linda walked up, eyebrows raised. "You know the CEO's poking around your rebar, right?" "She brought her own boots," Jack said. Elena grinned. "And gloves." They spent the next hour walking the site. Jack showed her the revised schematics, introduced her to the day laborers, and translated engineering jargon into something close to English. At one point, she crouched beside a stack of bricks and traced her fingers over the rough texture. "I used to come to places like this as a kid," she said softly. "My mom volunteered at shelters. I hated the smell of old coffee and linoleum, but I loved how different people looked once they had a place to be." Jack looked at her differently then, not as the woman he saved, not even as the CEO, but as someone who remembered. "Most people at your level," he said, "don't care what the bricks feel like. Most people at my level haven't had to start over." Jack tilted his head. "You started over." A shadow passed across her eyes, and for a moment he thought she might actually tell him something real. But she just smiled, thin and tired. Everyone has a beginning they don't talk about. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with oranges and golds, Elena stood at the edge of the site and looked back at the building. "What do you see when you look at this?" she asked. Jack took a long breath. "I see a place where someone might come in broken, and leave a little less so." She nodded. "That's the goal." Then she turned to him. "Do you think you'll stay on this project, I mean?" Jack considered it. "I'm not here because I was rescued," he said slowly. "I'm here because I want to build something that matters. If that's still the offer, I'll stay." Elena extended her hand. "It is." He took it. That night, as Jack returned to the hospital, Lily was awake coloring in a notebook with crayons someone from the nurses' station had given her. "Daddy," she said, smiling, "look what I made." He took the paper. It was a drawing stick, figures in hard hats smiling in front of a tall building with a garden on the roof. "That's you," she pointed. "Building something big." Jack felt something warm bloom in his chest. "I like that," he said. "You think I can do it?" Lily looked up with all the faith in the world. "You always fix things, Daddy." And for the first time in years, Jack believed maybe she was right. The next morning began with sunlight pouring through the window of the hospital room, soft and golden. Jack sat in the armchair beside Lily's bed, half asleep with his boots still on his head, tilted at an awkward angle. The quiet beeping of the monitors had faded into background noise like a rhythm he no longer noticed. Lily stirred. Daddy Jack jolted awake, rubbed his eyes, and leaned forward. "Hey, sweetheart." Her smile was small but full of mischief. "You snore." "I do not." "You do," she whispered, clearly delighted to be winning this argument. "I drew a picture of it." He laughed, ruffling her hair gently. "You feel okay?" She nodded. "The nurse gave me apple juice and let me have 2 straws." Jack leaned in with mock seriousness. 2 straws? You must be very important." "I am," she said proudly, then grew thoughtful. "Are you going back to work today?" Jack hesitated. "Just for a few hours. Linda needs help with the new building." "Is it for kids?" "Some parts, yeah. A place for kids and grown-ups who don't have homes, or jobs, or people who need a place to start over." Lily was quiet, then asked, "Is that like starting a new story?" Jack blinked. "Yeah, exactly like that." She looked at him, then her eyes big and wondering. "Daddy, did you fix your story too?" The question hung in the air like breath on cold glass. Jack felt his throat tighten. He didn't know how to answer. He thought of the years after the collapse of his company, after Vanessa Lily's mother had passed, and everything he thought he knew about safety and planning crumbled. There were no perfect lines in his story, no neat endings. Just detours, days where getting out of bed had been the biggest victory. He reached out and took her hand. "I'm working on it, kiddo." That afternoon, Lily was discharged. Jack brought her home to their small rental apartment, 2 bedrooms worn but clean and decorated with crayon art on the fridge. He set her up on the couch with a stack of books and a promise to be back by dinner. At the construction site, the air smelled like sawdust and diesel. Jack arrived to find Linda and the crew gathered around a stack of plans arguing about measurements for the outdoor staircase. "I told them the angle was off," Linda said, handing Jack a tape measure before he could speak. He smiled. "Nice to see you, too." They worked through the problem together, adjusting the design and salvaging materials to meet code. Jack felt the rhythm returning problem-solution purpose. There was something sacred in building with your hands and watching something emerge where there had been only rubble. Later, while waiting for a delivery truck, Jack noticed Elena standing by the chain-link fence speaking with a young mother and 2 children. The kids wore oversized jackets, clinging shyly to their mother's legs. Jack wandered over. "She's asking if the center will have a daycare," Elena said as Jack approached. "Says she wants to go back to school but can't if she doesn't have anyone to watch the little ones." Jack looked at the woman and smiled. "That's exactly the kind of story this place is meant to change." Elena turned to him. "You know, I spent the first part of my career designing towers for hedge fund firms and downtown law offices. Spaces full of glass and marble that nobody actually touched." She looked back at the children. "This feels different." Jack studied her. There was something in her voice earnest, unguarded. He recognized it. It was the same look he'd seen in the mirror when Lily was born, the moment you realized your work had to mean more than just a paycheck. "You ever build something for someone you never met?" Jack asked. "All the time," Elena said. "But it's never felt like enough. Until now." That evening, Jack invited Elena to stop by his place. For a real tour, he said, joking of the humble engineer's castle. To his surprise, she accepted. Lily met her at the door, wearing one of Jack's old T-shirts like a dress and a tiara made from pipe cleaners. "You must be Elena Lilly," said solemnly. "I am," Elena replied, crouching down to Lily's level. "And you must be the boss around here." "Correct." Lily nodded. "Would you like some invisible tea? We're out of juice." Elena played along, smiling gently as Lily served from a plastic teapot. Jack watched from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel and trying not to look like he was staring. But he was. And something in him stirred. She didn't look like a CEO now. She looked like someone trying to remember what being human felt like. After Lily fell asleep, they sat on the balcony the night quiet except for distant city sounds. She asked me this morning if I'd fixed my story, Jack said. Elena looked over. What did you say? I told her I'm still working on it. She nodded, silent for a while. I had a sister, she said suddenly. Claire, 2 years younger. We grew up close, but when our parents passed, there was disagreement about the company, about money. She walked away. I haven't spoken to her in 7 years. Jack waited, knowing better than to interrupt. I've spent so long trying to prove I was strong enough to run everything Elena said, that I didn't need help, that I didn't need anyone. But last week, when that man came at me in that alley, I didn't think about titles or status. I just thought this might be how it ends, and no one knows who I really am anymore. She turned to Jack. But you didn't walk away. He swallowed. Sometimes the things we don't plan are the only parts that save us. They sat in silence again. Not awkward, but meaningful. Above them, a single star broke through the haze, and below, in a city that rarely paused long enough to notice grace when it passed by, 2 people bruised rebuilding began quietly to heal. The following week settled into a rhythm that Jack hadn't felt in years. Mornings were spent preparing Lily's lunch and walking her to the school bus. Afternoons were consumed by concrete blueprints and the kind of conversations that had once made him feel alive, conversations about function utility, how design could serve people, not just impress investors. Elena became a regular presence at the construction site. Not in a performative press release kind of way, but as someone who listened, who walked the space like she was trying to understand its heartbeat. She carried a notebook and scribbled furiously, sometimes asking questions about things no executive ever cared about. You think we can fit a rooftop garden here? She asked one morning, gesturing at the steel framing above the main entrance. Jack squinted up. Structurally, yes. Logistically, depends on how ambitious you're feeling. I'm always ambitious, she said, and stubborn. I'm the younger sibling, she replied almost offhand. Jack glanced at her. You never talk about your family. She paused. That's because I try not to. The silence between them stretched just enough to make Jack feel the temperature change. Elena didn't offer more, and he didn't push, but something shifted in her eyes like glass that had just started to crack. That night, Jack lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling fan. The low whir filled the quiet, but his thoughts raced. He couldn't shake the image of Elena's face when he asked about her family. He recognized that look. It was the same one he'd worn for years every time someone asked about his wife. Some wounds didn't scar over. They just learned to live below the surface waiting. 2 days later, a delivery error set the site schedule back several hours. Jack offered to reroute some of the logistics himself, meeting with a local salvage contractor who'd been helping them secure eco-friendly materials. While sorting through the invoice records, Jack's eyes caught something that didn't make sense. A name. A familiar one. Silverstone Development Group. It was listed as a consultant entity for the original proposal of the community project before Elena took over the CEO role. But Jack knew that name better than most. It was the shell company used to force his old firm into bankruptcy 5 years ago. The air left his lungs. He clicked deeper. Cross-referenced the name. There it was. Silverstone was majority-owned by Warden Corp at the time, and not just that the board of directors included someone with a name Jack hadn't seen in years. Edwin Ward, Elena's father. He stared at the screen like it had slapped him. His hands trembled. He felt something inside him collapse not loudly but in a quiet, devastating way like a bridge giving out in the dark. He had tried so hard not to look back. He had forced himself to believe that maybe for once the universe had decided to bring something good. But now he wondered if all of this Elena the job, the project had been part of some carefully constructed redemption campaign. Did she know? Did she bring him here to ease her conscience or worse? Was it guilt by association? That evening, Jack didn't go straight home. He sat in his truck for nearly 45 minutes, staring at the windshield, gripping the steering wheel as the city moved around him like a river he couldn't step into. His phone buzzed. "Elena, team. Dinner tomorrow at 6. Hope you and Lily can make it." He didn't reply. Instead, he drove to a quiet street on the outskirts of downtown and parked outside a nondescript townhouse with no nameplate. He hadn't been there in years. He sat there wondering what would have happened if he had fought harder back then, if he'd taken the company to court, if he hadn't walked away when everything fell apart. But then again, he wouldn't have Lily. He wouldn't have become the man who rescued a stranger in an alley without asking for her name. He wasn't angry. He was heartbroken. The next morning at the site, Jack was distant. He kept his head down, his voice measured. Linda noticed. "You look like a man who just found a crack in a foundation he trusted," she said quietly as they reviewed the blueprints. Jack didn't answer. Linda didn't need him to. She waited a moment, then added, "Sometimes it's not the structure. Sometimes it's the story behind it." He nodded. "You ever feel like you were pulled into something without knowing you were a piece of someone else's puzzle all the time?" she said. "But then, I remember just because someone else laid the first brick doesn't mean they get to decide what we build with the rest." That night, Jack dropped Lily off at a friend's sleepover and walked toward the Warden Corp building with a single question burning in his chest. Elena met him at the rooftop terrace, the same place she'd proposed the idea of a rooftop garden. She was setting up for the team dinner string lights casting a warm glow over the cement. "Didn't think you'd come," she said, smiling. Jack didn't smile back. He stepped closer. His voice was calm, but beneath it, thunder. "You knew about Silverstone." Her smile faded. She froze. "Elena, did you know?" She looked down. "Yes," she whispered. The silence that followed was suffocating. "You knew what your family did to me," Jack said slowly, every word a weight. "I didn't know when you saved me," she said. "I swear. I didn't know until I saw your name in the interview schedule. Then I checked the files. I found the contracts. My father. He made those decisions. I was just the daughter learning the business, watching from behind a glass wall. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you. You let me walk back into this building, work on this project. You sat at my table. You spoke to my daughter. I didn't do it out of pity," she said, her voice cracking. "I did it because I saw who you are, and I knew you deserved more than the lies my family built this company on." Jack turned away. The city stretched out below them, so many lights, so many stories. "I can't be part of something that started like that," he said. "Even if it's better now." Elena's voice was a whisper. "You already are." He walked away without another word. She didn't follow. She just stood there, surrounded by everything she'd built and everything she might now lose. The air between them stayed quiet for 3 days. Jack didn't return to the site. He sent no explanation, no apology, just silence. The kind that felt colder than anger, heavier than accusation. It echoed louder than any words Elena could have spoken. Each morning, she stood by the window of her office looking out over the skyline, expecting to see him among the workers below. Each afternoon, she checked her inbox, half hoping for a message, half dreading it. There was nothing. It was strange how quickly the absence of someone could take up more space than their presence ever had. Jack spent those days working on his truck. Not because it needed repairs, at least not urgently, but because the process of taking something apart and putting it back together gave him clarity. Unlike people machines, made sense. They broke in visible places. They told you when something was wrong. And they didn't lie? He barely spoke even to Lily, except to assure her he was okay. She didn't press. She just climbed into his lap one evening while he sat under the hood, hugged him without a word, and rested her head on his chest. "Are you fixing something again, Daddy?" she murmured. He swallowed hard. Trying to. On the 4th day, Linda showed up at Jack's apartment. She didn't call ahead, just knocked twice, then waited. When Jack opened the door, she was holding a brown paper bag that smelled like greasy Chinese takeout and a look that said she wasn't leaving without being heard. "I didn't come to fix you," she said bluntly. "I came because you're throwing away something that still has nails in it." Jack stepped aside, letting her in. They sat on the couch while Lily read quietly in her room. "You mad at her?" Linda asked, opening the bag. "I'm hurt," Jack admitted. "And I don't know what part of this was ever real." Linda scoffed, stabbing a piece of sesame chicken. "Son, no one fakes that kind of look she had the night you walked out." Jack glanced at her. "You saw her, I didn't have to. It was written all over the walls the next morning." She pulled the proposal to the board, halted 2 other developments tied to her father, said she wouldn't move forward until they were reviewed by independent ethics counsel. Jack blinked. She did what Linda nodded. "It's a mess. Investors are mad. Lawyers are twitchy. She doesn't care." She said, and I quote, "If it's built on broken ground, we tear it down and start again." Sound familiar? Jack sat back, stunned. Linda leaned forward. "You walked into her life with no idea who she was and you saved her. And maybe that was fate. But what she's doing now, that's choice. That's her stepping into the mess and trying to be better. Isn't that what you've been doing for the last 5 years?" He didn't answer. Linda set down the takeout and stood. "You don't have to forgive her. But don't you dare pretend she hasn't earned your respect." That night, Jack stood outside Lily's bedroom door, listening to her soft breathing. She had drawn something new on the fridge, a picture of him holding hands with a woman in a blue dress beside a big building with hearts on the roof. Underneath it, in crayon-scrawled letters, "My daddy builds things. So does she." His throat tightened. He didn't sleep much. The next morning, Elena arrived at Warden Corp before sunrise. She hadn't slept either. She walked through the main floor past assistants who avoided her gaze, past directors who whispered behind closed doors. The ripple effects of her decision were everywhere: dropped deals, paused, partnerships, pending investigations. But her conscience was quieter than it had ever been. She stepped onto the 31st floor and opened the blinds in her office. The sky outside was a soft, expectant gray. Then she turned to find Jack standing at her doorway. No knock, just him. He looked tired, worn in a way only the truth could make someone, but also steady, solid. She didn't say anything. He took a step forward, then another. "I built a home," once he said. "For Lily. After her mom died. I poured everything into it. Every board, every bolt. I thought if the walls were strong enough they could hold back everything else." He paused. "But the cracks always come. No matter how well you build, they find you." Elena's eyes shimmered. "What did you do?" I stopped patching them. Started listening to them instead. That's how you figure out what needs to change. She nodded slowly. "You should have told me the truth, Elena. From the beginning. I know. But I should have asked why you didn't." She took a breath. "Because I was afraid you'd walk away again." Jack stepped closer. "I almost did." A pause, then softer. "I don't want to anymore." She blinked once, twice. "Why?" "Because maybe we both deserve to build something new. Not to erase the past, but to honor what we learned from it." Her eyes searched his. "And what if it breaks again?" Jack smiled faintly. "Then we fix it. Together." Later that morning, they walked the construction site side by side. No labels, no CEO, no employee. Just 2 people flawed, bruised, real walking through steel frames and sawdust ready to build something they both believed in. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like starting over. It felt like finally starting right. 2 weeks passed. The site hummed with life again, and so did Jack. He returned to work without drama or announcement, simply showing up early with coffee and rolling up his sleeves like he never left. If anyone noticed the new steadiness in his gaze or the subtle way Elena's eyes lingered on him when she passed, they didn't comment. They didn't need to. Jack wasn't the only one rebuilding something. Elena had traded quiet luxury for sharp edges. She was in the fight now publicly and unapologetically. Headlines spread quickly. Warden CEO halts legacy projects amid ethics review. Board members were livid, shareholders jittery. But she didn't waver. One morning she called for a town hall with all Warden Corp employees. Jack stood in the back of the room out of sight watching. She stood alone at the front, no podium, no assistant, just her. "I know many of you have questions," she began, "and frankly, you deserve answers." Silence. She continued. "Some of our past projects approved before I stepped into this role were advanced through unethical acquisitions. Some of them impacted small businesses, families, communities. And we were complicit." She looked up, her voice unwavering. "I can't undo what was done, but I can decide what kind of company we become now." Jack watched the room shift. Doubt, surprise, and then something harder to name, respect. That night he found her alone in the parking lot leaning against her car. The sky was still pink with the last edge of sunset. "I saw the live stream," he said. She didn't look surprised. "Did I sound completely insane?" "You sounded like someone telling the truth in a room full of people used to hearing something else." She smiled, tired but proud. "I didn't realize how heavy it would feel, until I let it go." Jack nodded. "It shows. In a good way." They stood there a while. Then she turned to him softly. "Jack, there's something else I haven't told you." He studied her. "Go on." She swallowed. "I reached out to my sister." That stopped him. "Elena. I didn't do it for closure. I did it because watching you with Lily reminded me that walking away doesn't make the hurt go away. It just makes it lonelier." She took a breath. She hasn't replied. "But I'll wait, like someone once waited for me." Jack didn't speak for a moment. "Then, you becoming the woman you needed back then." She nodded, and this time her eyes shimmered with something gentler. "Maybe I'm also becoming the woman someone else might need now." The next day, Elena arrived at the site with a small gift for Lily, a sketchbook with a sunflower embossed on the front, wrapped in twine. Jack raised an eyebrow as she handed it over. "What's this?" he asked. Elena smiled. "A little thank you. Your daughter sees more than most people twice her age. She reminds me what this project is actually about." Jack read the inscription inside, "For Lily." Every time someone tells you stories can't be rewritten, pick up a pencil and prove them wrong. Elena. Later that week, Elena met with the Warden Board of Directors. They expected compromise. They got revolution. She proposed dissolving several long-standing holding companies, including Silverstone Development Group. She offered a new corporate charter with transparency and community oversight embedded in its foundation. "I won't run a company that buries its mistakes beneath glass towers," she said. When one board member accused her of self-sabotage, she replied, "No. I'm rebuilding, from the ground up, like we should have done years ago." Jack didn't attend the meeting, but he waited outside the boardroom, pacing like a father during a delivery. When Elena emerged, her expression was unreadable. "Well?" he asked. She exhaled. "We lost 3 board members." And she smiled. "We gained something better." That weekend, Jack invited Elena and a few of the construction crew to his apartment for dinner. It wasn't much: folding chairs, paper plates, and a crock-pot of chili, but it felt like celebration. Lily played DJ from the couch, blasting old Motown hits that made Linda dance reluctantly until everyone joined in. Jack couldn't remember the last time he saw Elena laugh so freely, head tilted back, eyes bright. At one point, Lily tugged Elena's hand and pulled her into her room. "Want to see something?" the little girl asked. Elena nodded. Lily pulled out the sketchbook, flipped through pages of buildings with hearts for windows, bridges made of stars, and stick figures holding hands. "This one's you," Lily said, pointing. "You're helping Daddy fix things." Elena's throat tightened. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" Lily tilted her head. "Aren't you?" Elena sat down beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead. "I'm trying," she said softly. "Sometimes it takes longer than we think." Lily grinned. "That's okay. Daddy says the best things take time." That night, when everyone had gone and Lily had fallen asleep, Jack walked Elena out to her car. They stood under the porch light, the air cool with spring. "You didn't have to do all this," he said quietly. "The board, your father's legacy. It's a lot." "I did," she replied, "because I needed to stop pretending that healing could happen without confrontation." She looked at him, eyes searching. "And you. You make me want to be better. Not for show, not for the company. For me." Jack took her hand. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. Then gently, "You're already getting there." As she drove away that night, Jack stood on the porch a long while. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't dread it. He welcomed it. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't walk away. It's choosing to stay and help someone else find the strength to stay too. By early June, the south side of the city looked different. Steel beams had turned into support walls. The hollow warehouse that once echoed with silence now thrummed with the energy of progress. There were sounds of drills' boots on gravel and voices shouting measurements over the roar of power tools. But more than anything, there was hope, the kind that settled into the space like sunlight through scaffolding. Jack stood near the entrance, hands on his hips, eyes squinting in the morning glare. He wasn't checking the load-bearing trusses this time. He was watching people. Young apprentices, some barely out of high school. Older men retraining after layoffs. Single mothers hired through a new community employment program. They all moved with purpose, like the building was somehow theirs too. "You see that," Linda said, stepping up beside him. "What?" She gestured toward a small team hoisting drywall onto the third floor. 2 months ago, half of them didn't know which end of a hammer to hold. Now look at 'em. Jack grinned. "What changed? You did." He turned to her, surprised. Linda shrugged. "You walked into a broken blueprint and started fixing it before anyone asked. That kind of thing spreads." Jack looked back at the site. She was right, but he wasn't sure it was just him. It was Elena, too. It was everyone who had decided not to wait for permission to do the right thing. People didn't talk much about what had happened behind the scenes at Warden Corp, but the ripple effects were showing. The company's name, once known for luxury developments, was now being whispered in the same breath as community outreach and transparent reform. It wasn't perfect, but it was changing. And change, Jack had learned, never started with policies. It started with people who didn't walk away. Later that afternoon, he found Elena in the main hallway, crouched down beside a young volunteer who was holding blueprints upside down and looking thoroughly defeated. "Let me guess," Jack said, approaching. "You told him architecture was just like Legos." Elena glanced up and smiled. "He's 12. I had to meet him halfway." The boy grinned sheepishly and scurried off, a little more confident now. Jack handed Elena a bottle of water. "You've got a way with people. I'm just trying not to mess it up." Jack tilted his head. "You know, that's what makes it work, right? You're not pretending to have it all figured out." She stood slowly. "I used to think leadership was about being the smartest voice in the room. And now I think it's about listening when someone else finally has the courage to speak." Jack nodded, silent. Elena looked around the half-finished atrium. "You know, when this place is done, I want to name it something meaningful, something that reflects what we built here. What do you have in mind?" She turned to him, eyes soft. "Second ground." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Second ground." She smiled. "It's what you said. Remember, that you're not starting over, you're finally starting right." It stuck with me. He looked down at the concrete beneath his boots. The floor wasn't finished yet, but it already felt like a foundation. Solid. Earned. "Second ground," he said. "Yeah, that feels right." That evening, Elena hosted a small gathering on site. No donors, no reporters. Just the workers, volunteers, and a handful of community members who'd supported the project from day one. There were string lights hung from makeshift poles, folding tables with trays of food donated by local restaurants. A small speaker played soft blues as people laughed, shared stories, and, most importantly, stayed. Jack stood near the edge of it all, a cup of lemonade in hand, watching Elena move through the crowd. She wasn't performing. She was present. When she finally reached him, she looked tired but deeply content. "I talked to my sister." She said so softly, he almost didn't hear. Jack's eyes widened. Claire Elena nodded. She called. "We didn't talk about the past. Not really. Just about how the garden she planted in Vermont is finally growing again." It was awkward, but it was real. He put a hand on her shoulder. "That's a start." Elena smiled. She said something that stuck with me. She said, "Roots don't care about pride. They grow anyway." Jack chuckled. "Smart woman." "She is," Elena said. Then she added, "like someone else I know." Their eyes held for a moment, and the sounds of the party faded just enough to make room for something else, quiet understanding. Then Lily barreled over her cheeks, flushed with excitement. "Daddy, look what I made." She held up a paper sign drawn in thick crayon strokes. "Welcome to Second Ground, where good people start again." Jack knelt beside her. "Did you make that yourself?" Miss Elena helped, Lily said proudly. "But I picked the words." He looked at Elena. She looked back, and neither of them had anything clever to say, because some moments didn't need words. Some moments just needed to be felt. After the party ended, Jack and Elena stood side by side beneath the last string of lights watching the crew clean up. "You think this place will really help people?" she asked. Jack thought of Lily, of Linda, of the kid with the upside-down blueprint, of himself. "I think," he said slowly, "this place will remind people that broken doesn't mean finished, that a scar doesn't mean the story's over." Elena turned to him. "And us." He met her gaze. "We're not broken, just unfinished." She smiled. Not a business smile. Not a brave one. A real one. "I can live with that," she whispered. Jack took her hand right there under the lights and held it, not like a promise, not like a conclusion, but like the beginning of something that didn't need to rush to be real, something that had been tested and chosen and earned. The official ribbon cutting was still a week away, but the building already breathed with life. Jack could feel it in the walls, in the echoes of laughter in the open atrium, the scent of fresh paint, the way footsteps fell just a little lighter now. Second Ground was no longer a construction site. It was becoming a promise. That morning, Jack walked the halls alone before the crews arrived. He passed the community kitchen where volunteers would soon prep meals for families in transition. The job training center, where rows of refurbished computers hummed quietly. The playroom, where Lily's drawings already lined the wall, a kaleidoscope of hope sketched in crayon. He paused at the roof access stairwell. Sunlight filtered down through the windows. The rooftop garden. Elena's idea. His hands ran along the steel railing as he climbed. When he stepped onto the roof, the city opened up in every direction. Morning haze drifting over brick and glass, the hum of traffic just distant enough to feel like background music. Raised garden beds were already in place, filled with soil and seedlings, basil, lettuce, lavender. A row of sunflowers leaned into the light, still small, still waiting. Jack knelt, running a hand through the earth. "Thought I might find you here." He turned. Elena stood in the doorway, coffee in one hand, a folder tucked under her arm. Her hair was wind-blown, her heels replaced by boots. She looked less like a CEO and more like someone who belonged exactly here. "I needed a moment," he said. She crossed to him and handed him the coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "I was thinking about what comes next." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You're not done building." Jack smiled faintly. Not even close. They stood in silence for a while, watching the morning take shape. Then she said, "The city council approved our grant extension." Jack looked at her surprised. "We're expanding," she added. 3 more community centers across the state modeled after this one. He exhaled slowly. You're serious? As a second chance, she said. He let out a low whistle. That's a lot of work. She nodded. That's why I came to ask you something. Jack glanced sideways. You offering me a raise? Elena laughed. More like a mission. She opened the folder and pulled out a proposal. His name was on the top. Director of Community Infrastructure, she said. Leading the design training the next generation, building something that lasts. Something that matters. Jack stared at the paper. I don't need an answer today, she said gently, but I know you. You'll think about this on the walk home, on the way to the grocery store, in the shower while folding laundry. You spying on me? No, she said, smiling. I just know what it looks like when a man's heart starts catching up to his purpose. Jack set the folder down carefully on a planter ledge. I never thought I'd get back here, he admitted. Backward to a place where the world wants what I have to offer. Elena's voice softened. Jack. The world always wanted it. You just needed someone to say yes out loud. That evening, Jack picked Lily up from her after-school art club. Her sneakers were splattered with paint, her hands sticky with glue, and her smile wider than the whole street. Guess what, she said, climbing into the truck. I got picked to help with the grand opening tour. Jack blinked. You miss Runaway from the Mic, I'm brave now, she said proudly. Ms. Elena said I could be the voice for all the kids who'll use the building. He smiled. She's not wrong. Then Lily looked at him serious. Daddy, are we staying here? Like for good? Jack's grip on the steering wheel loosened slightly. He looked over at her, this child who had been his anchor in storms he never asked for. I think we are, he said. She nodded, satisfied. Good. 'Cause I already told my class you built the building and saved the CEO and fixed her heart. He choked on a laugh. That's one way to put it. When they got home, Jack pulled out the folder from his jacket pocket. He laid it on the kitchen table and stared at it. It didn't feel like a contract. It felt like a doorway. He thought of all the places his name had disappeared from in the past, letterheads, building permits, even mailboxes. Now, here it was again. Not by accident, by choice. The next morning, Jack arrived at the site earlier than usual. Elena was already there. He didn't say anything as he handed her a cup of coffee. She took it, watching him. Then he said, I'm in. She blinked. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She nodded, eyes bright. And for the first time, Jack saw it clearly, not just the building, not just the title, not just the future. He saw a life. One not made in a boardroom or a courtroom or under flashing lights, but here under the open sky on ground they had fought for together. Second ground. It wasn't just for the community. It was for them. For anyone who ever thought they were too far gone to begin again. And this time Jack wasn't just a builder. He was a believer. In himself. In her. In what could rise from the rubble if you had the courage to stay, the humility to change, and someone who believed you were worth the effort. The day of the grand opening arrived with a kind of stillness Jack hadn't felt in years. It wasn't quiet. There were trucks unloading chairs, children running through the halls, volunteers adjusting banners, but beneath the motion there was something steady. Something settled. The building was ready. Second ground stood tall, sun-washed and graceful against the concrete skyline. Every beam and tile and brushed metal railing had a story. A hand, a heart. Jack adjusted his collar and glanced at the courtyard where guests were beginning to gather. Neighborhood families in Sunday best, city officials, volunteers, construction workers in clean shirts, some with paint still under their nails. No red carpets, no gala. Just real people, the ones who'd helped build it. And at the center of it all, Lily. She wore a pale yellow dress with mismatched barrettes in her hair and held a microphone that looked comically oversized in her small hands. Elena stood beside her, crouched low, offering encouragement that only Lily could hear. Jack stood off to the side, but Elena's eyes found him through the crowd. She smiled warm and quiet, and he nodded back. A silent pact. "We did this." The mayor took the mic first, saying all the right things about economic impact and revitalization, but the crowd only politely clapped. It wasn't until Lily stepped up that everything stilled. She cleared her throat, glanced down at her note cards, colorful hand-drawn ones, and then out at the audience. "Hi, I'm Lily Nolan. I'm 7 3/4, she began, her voice wavering. "And this place is called Second Ground. But to me, it's also something else." She paused. Jack held his breath. "It's a place where people get to start new stories. Like my dad. Like Ms. Elena. Like lots of people here. Sometimes stories don't go the way you planned. Sometimes they get crumpled. But this place, it's where you can smooth them out again." There was a long, hushed silence. Then a wave of soft applause broke through, followed by more until the courtyard filled with it. Jack wiped at his eyes unapologetically. Inside, the doors opened and the first tour began. Elena led the group with Lily proudly pointing out all her favorite places. The reading corner with beanbags, the mural she helped paint the rooftop garden. When they reached the atrium, Jack stood waiting. He motioned the group toward the plaque mounted near the entrance. Handcrafted bronze mounted in reclaimed wood, Second Ground where new stories begin. Dedicated to those who never walked away. Underneath were 2 names, Jack Nolan lead designer, Elena Ward, project visionary. Someone read it aloud. Then someone else clapped. And suddenly the atrium echoed again, not with tools or construction, but with joy. Jack turned to find Elena already watching him. He walked over. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did." He glanced around. "Still can't believe it." She smiled softly. "That's the best part of doing something real. It always feels impossible until you see it finished." Later that evening, the building emptied out. The food tables were picked clean. The banners rolled up. The crowd had gone home, but the light lingered soft and golden, spilling through the tall windows. Jack stood alone on the rooftop, leaning against the garden railing. The sunflowers had grown. Not fully bloomed yet, but taller. Reaching. Footsteps approached behind him. He didn't turn. "You always this reflective after ribbon-cutting," Elena asked, her voice like music against the hush. He chuckled. "Only the ones that feel like home." She stepped beside him. "It really does feel like that, doesn't it?" Jack nodded. They stood quietly for a while, the city laid out in shadowed blue below them, the sky brushing pink and silver overhead. Then Elena said, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," he teased. She elbowed him lightly. "I've been thinking. This doesn't have to be the end of anything." Jack turned to her, really looking. "You're not talking about the building." "No," she said barely above a whisper. "I'm talking about us." A long pause. She stepped closer, close enough for the space between them to feel like something sacred. "I don't know what it's supposed to look like, and I'm still figuring out how to be the kind of woman who doesn't run when things get hard." Jack's voice was steady. "Then we learn it together." Her eyes shimmered. "You sure? I'm sure." He reached out, took her hand gently in his. And for the first time, it didn't feel like 2 broken people trying to fill silence. It felt like 2 whole people building something with intention, something earned, something resilient. As they walked back down the stairwell, lights flickering on as the evening deepened, Jack thought of the life he'd left behind, the one that had collapsed in silence, grief and shame. And he thought of this one. New, imperfect, radiantly real. He glanced sideways at Elena. She looked ahead, eyes bright like she saw something more than blueprints and headlines in their future. He smiled. Second Ground. He finally understood. It wasn't just a place. It was a choice. To stay, to grow, to believe. And this time he wasn't walking away. The first autumn breeze swept through the city like a quiet benediction, rustling golden leaves across the front steps of Second Ground. The building stood warm against the soft chill glowing from within. Children's voices echoed in the atrium, the scent of baking bread drifted from the communal kitchen, and somewhere on the third floor a group of veterans gathered for their weekly carpentry class, fixing old chairs and, in a way, fixing themselves too. It had been 4 months since the grand opening. 4 months since the city witnessed what a second chance could look like when it was built with purpose, with care, with love. Jack stood by the rooftop garden, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the sunflowers sway in the wind. They'd bloomed late this year, tall and stubborn and brilliant, just like this place, just like the people who built it. He heard soft footsteps behind him and didn't need to turn. Elena stepped beside him, scarf tucked beneath her coat, cheeks pink from the cold. They survived the frost, she said, nodding toward the flowers. So did we, Jack said, smiling. She chuckled softly, slipping her gloved hand into his. No fanfare, no declarations. Just the gentle, quiet merging of two people who had already chosen each other through the mess, through the unknown, again and again. Downstairs, Lily was leading a group of kids through her own version of a tour. That's where my dad fixed the first leak, she said, pointing toward a water pipe. But he didn't know I saw it. He looked really proud after, even though no one clapped. The kids giggled. And that's Ms. Elena's office, she added, standing tall. She's a boss, but she still came to my spelling bee. One of the younger boys raised a hand. Are you famous? Lily paused, thoughtfully. Not really, but I live in a place where famous things happen. Jack and Elena watched from the upper level, leaning on the railing. She's got your timing, Elena said. She's got your honesty, Jack replied. That afternoon, the center hosted its first official alumni lunch. Dozens of community members who had used Second Ground's services, job seekers, single parents, small business hopefuls returned to share their stories. A former mechanic now ran a mobile repair service from a van he bought with a grant. A woman, once homeless, now taught literacy classes in the building's evening program. A teenager who once helped hang drywall now trained as an apprentice electrician. Each one stood in front of the crowd, nervous at first, but then transformed, proud, steady, visible. Elena stood at the back with Jack, her hand on his back. I used to think legacy was about having a building with your name on it, she whispered. Jack glanced sideways. And now she looked ahead. Now I think it's about creating space for others to become who they're meant to be. Quietly, without needing to be remembered for it. Jack nodded, letting her words settle. Then, from the podium, the moderator called her name. Elena Ward, our founder and heart behind this vision. We're honored to have you speak. Elena stepped forward slowly. Jack gave her hand a light squeeze as she passed. She took the mic with a smile, but this time it wasn't the kind that softened headlines or charmed boardrooms. It was the kind she gave Lily. And Jack. The kind she hadn't known how to offer when all this began. Hi, she said. I don't want to talk long. I just want to say this. She glanced around at the faces in the room, many of whom she now knew by name. When this building was just an idea, we thought we were building it for the community. And we were. But somewhere along the way, I realized something else. I was building it for me, too. For the version of myself I thought I'd lost. For the version of others who were waiting to be seen. Her voice caught slightly. She paused. This place exists because people didn't walk away, because they stayed through discomfort, through brokenness, through history. They stayed, and they built. She smiled through the tears in her voice. And now, we get to be the kind of place that stays for someone else. After the applause faded, Jack found her outside on the front steps. The light was golden again, just like the first day he'd brought Lily home from the hospital. Everything about this moment felt earned. You always know how to say exactly the thing no one wants to admit they needed to hear, he said. She looked up at him. That's because I've been listening to you. They stood in silence, the breeze sweeping around them gently. Then Elena took something from her coat pocket and handed it to him. It was a small brass key. He raised an eyebrow. "It's for the new location," she said. "Upstate, Community Center number 2. Construction begins in spring." Jack turned the key over in his hand. "You sure you want me to take the lead on that?" She grinned. "I wouldn't trust it to anyone else." Then softer. "Besides, I already bought you a coffee mug that says Director of Groundbreaking Miracles." Jack laughed full and free before leaning down and kissing her forehead. And for a moment nothing else mattered, not the past, not the risks, not the long road still ahead. Just this. 2 people who stayed. That night, when Jack tucked Lily into bed, she looked up and said, "Daddy? Are we really going to help build another place?" "We are," he said, "if you're up for another adventure." She yawned and smiled. "I think Ms. Elena should come with us." Jack kissed her on the forehead. I think she already said yes. Outside, the city quieted. The lights of Second Ground glowed into the night, steady and warm like a lighthouse in the middle of a stormy world. And inside those walls, in the cracks where most people feared the light would disappear, something stronger took root. Not just second chances, not just new beginnings, but belonging. Because sometimes the most extraordinary thing you can build is the life you never thought you'd get to live again, and the people who choose to stay in it with you. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel for more inspiring tales like this one. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your presence means more than you know. Until next time, take care and keep believing in second chances.